So I've come to the midpoint of Season 1, and it might be more accurate to say I've reached the finale of the first half of Season 1, and we do get to go out on a bit of a triumphant note, but like all things Attack on Titan, even this triumphant note is complicated. So let's get to it. Now, Episode 13 is Part 9 in the struggle for Trost, and this struggle has made up the bulk of the first half of the season. And with Eren's Titan form not responding as planned, the soldiers are kind of left out in the field for a prolonged time, and they're really paying the price for this. What I really like here at the beginning of this episode is that we get to see a microcosm of humanity's struggle, and we see this in the form of Jean. Jean is without equipment that works, so he's trying to repurpose some equipment from a fallen soldier. Now, this seems like a straightforward way to address, I guess, what you would call an unfortunate situation. It's kind of sad that it's come to this, but it's a simple enough solution, right? The problem is that the buckle is stuck, and Jean can't seem to get this equipment off of the fallen soldier. And this kind of works as a metaphor for everything we've seen humanity putting up with up to this point in their battle against the Titans. It seems like no matter how simple the plan, it runs into these seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And they just capture it so well here. And I kind of believe that a good story should never offer simple solutions to a complex problem. But this show goes one step further by making what might even appear to be a simple problem complex once you scratch the surface and you get to see what's really underneath of it. And we get to see that here with Jean trying to do something as simple as taking equipment off another soldier. And this type of thing that we're seeing right here, this is the kind of thing that, to me at least, makes this world feel so real. And it feels so lived in, and it's almost like it's anticipatory of the viewer's thoughts and the viewer's emotions. On any other show, or at least some other shows to say the least, I would probably say out loud to nobody in particular, like, why doesn't he just take equipment off of one of those dead guys? Well, this show counters that before I can even get a chance to say it. I really like how this small event just encapsulates so much like the operating systems of this world. And by operating systems, I mean how this story functions. People identify a problem, they formulate a solution, then they get smacked upside the head about 5 times by the problem, and then they end up heartbroken, but hopefully they can be rescued so the story at least continues on some remnant of legs for humanity. Now, Jean gets a rescue this time in the form of Marco, who does swoop in and he provides enough of a distraction for Jean to get that very much needed gear. But even then, that's not the end of the trouble. Because, like I've said, there are no easy solutions here. Because when Jean does get that equipment, he has trouble using it because it's not calibrated for his use. I'm just continually impressed how no details are overlooked here in this Attack on Titan story. As all this is happening and unfolding, we hear some heavy, thudding, very intimidating footsteps just kind of reverberate through the field of battle here. And I wonder what new kind of horror is going to emerge from the fog of war. What's going to be here to torment our would-be heroes, these poor soldiers we're following on this battle against the Titans. But this is where the show gives us a much-needed and well-earned moment of triumph. Because these footsteps belong to the Titan form of Eren. And thanks to Armin's intervention, Eren is thrown back on task. And the imagery used here, the relative size of the boulder to Eren's Titan form, his posture, even how he's bearing the weight, I think it's a very intentional visual reference to Greek mythology and Atlas. And Atlas was a Titan after all, and a Titan who held up the world. I think it's fair to say that Eren is kind of bearing the weight of this Attack on Titan story world on his shoulders in this moment. So I think this reference is an absolutely appropriate one. I also think it's a little too good to pass up. I also like in this scene how Eren's footsteps shake the ground. Just like his very existence, maybe, has shaken humanity's perceptions of the world on this particular day. Sometimes it's hard to forget just how much of this is happening in one day, the way it's stretched out over multiple episodes. But when you step back a moment and look at it, this is all one very world-changing day. And I gotta say, it certainly sent me on a frenzy of crackpot theories. And maybe if I watch this episode a third time, I'll see a frame or something where a pot gets cracked, and then I can make a bigger deal out of that is probably necessary. But that's what I do. I can't help it. But with Eren finally engaged into his planned task, we see like a reinvigoration of these surviving soldiers. We see those troops that were assigned to Eren's bodyguard, and with their stiffened resolve, they go from being the hunted to at least attempting to be the hunters here. And this is a real moment of humanity kind of stepping up for itself. Now, nothing shows this better than an absolutely beautiful sequence that follows Mikasa as she takes both of her blades, and we just get to follow them while they slice through that weak spot on the back of a Titan's neck. And then Eren gives us the most triumphant moment in this show so far, when he wedges that big boulder that he's carrying on his back and his neck and his shoulders. He wedges it right into that breach, and for the first time, probably since the Titans first appeared 107 years before these events we're watching unfold in this episode, this is probably the first time that some loss of human life in a fight against the Titans wasn't in vain. And Rico, one of the characters, takes a moment to appreciate that and helps us as the audience get pulled into that moment so we can appreciate it too. Like I said, this is a much needed triumphant moment that the show's definitely earned at this point. We've paid the emotional price to get to a little bit of victory here. But with the objective achieved, well, now the combatants have to extract themselves because it's still a really deadly situation. These front lines, there's still Titans out there. And we can't celebrate because we realize that this extraction of these troops is not going to be a simple task. And I really like how this show makes it clear that no job is finished until it's actually finished. Like, this job is not going to be finished for a while yet. This narrative is going to continue on quite a bit during this episode. And I've got to say that I've seen plenty of stories in which once the mission is accomplished, we just kind of smash cut and we're at a big celebration where like everyone's getting their medals and everybody's happy. But that's not what we're going to get with Attack on Titan. At least not from the 13 and a half episodes I've seen so far. But fortunately for our point of view characters, a hero arrives in the form of Captain Levi. And he pops in, he wipes out a Titan with a smooth, focused attack. And then he stands on a fallen Titan, and he's kind of between the sun and our observers in the moment, and he's only visible in silhouette here. Now, one of the soldiers looks at the silhouette and says, "Mikasa." Now, this slammed over my head like a bucket of ice water being poured on me. It just like shocked me to awareness for a moment. It shook me to a particular realization. Now, previously when I talked about Levi, after that first appearance when he showed up in the show a couple of episodes back, I talked about potential symmetry between Levi and Eren, but this scene makes me think that he's much more like an alternate version of Mikasa. It took something as straightforward as a character stating it to hit me over the head with this and make me realize I'd kind of made an obvious, glaring overlook of the characterization from before. But he's much more like an alternate version of Mikasa. The way they're both like the best Titan killers of their respective crews, and even the role he'll take once he becomes a caretaker of sorts for Eren a little bit later on in this episode, it starts to become much more clear, and I feel like a real dum-dum for not seeing it before. But yeah, Levi and Mikasa are kind of cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways in terms of their characters. We get to maybe see alternate approaches that this same kind of Titan-killing, awesome, single-minded, perhaps slightly atypical character can have in this world. And like I said, I can't believe I missed it before, but hey, maybe it just means that I'm slowly garnering a deeper understanding of the story as it unfolds. I've said before that a lot of times things are told in 3 steps. You don't always have to catch it on the first step. It's okay if it takes that second or third step for the light bulb to go off over your head. And hey, at the very least, it gives me something else to talk about, right? Now, when that character says Mikasa, it may not have been intended this way, but I choose to perceive it a certain way. I choose it this way because it enhances my own enjoyment of the story. Maybe it'll enhance yours. Maybe it'll annoy you to hear me say this. But I like to think the reason the name is said is ambiguous, because it may have been that the speaker mistook Levi for Mikasa because he's in the sun. All we see is the outline. We see the way that he moves in the attack, and it's very similar to sort of the physical attributes that Mikasa shows when she kills a Titan. Or it may have simply been just to draw Mikasa's attention to the silhouette. I like it to be open-ended and able to be interpreted in more than one way. Like I said just a moment ago, that may not have been the intention, but that's how it lives in my head canon. And I gotta tell you, it's a strange place in my head. I recommend avoiding it if at all possible. Now with the breach sealed, we get a summary of this incredible offensive from the humans to deal with the Titans that are still in Trost. We see that cannons that are up on top of the wall, well, they just blast away at the Titans. And this is probably the most accurate simulation of shooting fish in a barrel that you can get without actually having fish and or a barrel. And then also we hear that Levi and the scouts, well, they kind of get this mop-up duty. Like they go in and they just mop up the remaining Titans in the city. And we get to feel a real rah-rah moment for the heroes here. The viewer gets a real feeling of triumph finally. And we've had a lot of defeat and a lot of setbacks and a lot of hopelessness. So I think it's good that we get this moment of triumph. I have to admit that I was sincerely exuberant watching this. It just allowed me to have a bit of a celebratory moment. But of course, this story brought me right back to reality by the way of Commander Pixis. Because Commander Pixis mentions the number of dead and wounded. There's a little over 200 dead, close to 900 wounded, and this has indeed been a costly victory for humanity. It hits home very, very quickly and in a very real way that war probably isn't something that should be celebrated. I mean, they have to fight for survival, you understand that, but there's no joy in war at all. And the significance of the day's events are important, like there's no denying that, but with the kind of casualties experienced, celebration really would be in poor taste here. And it's pretty impressive that they had Pixis point that out to the viewer who, if you were like me, you were in the middle of celebrating when he says this is no cause for celebration. It's really a humbling moment. I'm not used to being humbled by shows, and it's a good, different feeling. It's something that makes this show stand apart from so many other shows I could be watching instead. I think it's a big plus that this show can touch me in a unique way. Now, there's a common idiom that says the price of victory is high. And it's made very clear in the latter part of this episode because perhaps this could be considered a Pyrrhic victory. In my reaction to it, I think I even talked about King Pyrrhus. And if you don't know, Pyrrhus was a Greek king and he fought against the Romans in a battle called the Battle of Asculum. And even though he defeated the Romans, so many of his own soldiers died in the battle that it kind of felt like a moral defeat even though they technically won the day. I think the direct quote that historians have offered about this is that, quote, one other such victory would utterly undo him. And I really think the way that it's broken down after the battle that the struggle for Trost might qualify as a Pyrrhic victory. I don't know what the human population is at this point, and probably more relevant, I don't know the size of the standing army that humanity has here. But I imagine 1,000 or so casualties is pretty significant, and with a rate like that, humans could probably win their way to extinction in a short period of time if these tactics aren't revised. This show so far also really makes me think of World War I, or at least my perceptions of World War I, like I'm old, but I'm not that old. I only know what I've heard like third hand, I guess, at this point. But in World War I, weapons had been modernized and developed to be so good at killing, but battlefield tactics hadn't really developed to help humans live through this kind of fighting. And really what happened is that everybody on both sides were just slaughtered. And ultimately, at least in those early days of World War I, it seemed like the plan was just to keep throwing bodies at the enemy until they ran out of bullets. And that is a very costly way to win a battle. And seeing just like how ineffectual humanity has been against the Titans up until this point, and even with this victory having such a high cost, well, extinction seems like all but a foregone conclusion for humans at this point if they don't radically change their approach. One would really like to see them kind of take stock of their resources and see what works and what doesn't work and adapt to the situation. But most of the humans, at least the humans in a position of power that we see, with perhaps the exception of Pixis, well, they all seem pretty stubbornly set against progress from what we see. More importantly, they seem stubbornly against using Aaron properly. We also get to see that 2 Titans are taken prisoner in this battle. And this really opens up a lot of intriguing possibilities. I gotta admit though, I think it's pretty darn insane for them to try to even take Titans prisoners at this point. I think it's downright inconceivable, but perhaps that word does not mean what I think it means if you're a Princess Bride fan. But I wonder if studying these Titan prisoners is going to lead to a better understanding of like the genesis, the creation of these creatures. More importantly, a better understanding for us, the viewers. Or I wonder if they're going to be like paraded around like trophies in an attempt to build morale. And if they are paraded like trophies, then I have to wonder if like this is all going to backfire, kind of like a King Kong scenario where he was supposed to be a show on Broadway and next thing you know he's climbing the Empire State Building. Are they going to just go on a rampage in a population center? And also if humans try to like dissect them to better understand their physiology, will they just disintegrate before anything of value can be learned? Because we have seen when the Titans are dead, they kind of evaporate or disintegrate. They just go away. They dissolve. And also, it's a very real possibility that this idea of taking Titans prisoner, well, this may go nowhere. And I'd be fine with that. I mean, they don't have to follow every thread out to its ultimate conclusion. If this was just a moment to kind of flesh out the significance of the battle without ever revisiting it, I would be okay with that. But I'm also really curious what their plan is with Titan prisoners. I don't have any idea how that can turn out well. Something else we get to see, like I said, we are going to follow this to its conclusion. We're going to see that no job is finished until it's actually finished. So we get to see the cleanup effort in the days following the battle. And we're going to see that Jean runs across Marco's corpse. And of course, that's a real emotional moment for him. And then I guess the public health official that's overseeing the cleanup, well, she inquires as to Marco's identity. And not only does this reinforce the price of the battle, but they also emphasize some concerns about like infectious disease that can be spreading if these corpses aren't disposed of properly. And just adding a whole nother dimension to this story and to the conflict that's going on. I mean, there's just so much depth and there's so much attention to detail. And this sort of has all the touches that you need to make this world feel so real. Like I said before, it feels so lived in. And I just continue to be impressed. No matter how much I'm impressed by the previous episode, the next episode I watch seems to continue to take it to a higher level. There's no way they can possibly keep this up, right? Now, I've read novels that have this kind of attention to detail and care enough to follow a story all the way through to its very real, often unpleasant consequences, but I'm not sure I've seen it very often in movies or television, so I absolutely appreciate what we're given here in these moments. We also see a cluster of corpses that are encapsulated in like this red mass. And we find out that these are humans that were consumed by the Titans and then regurgitated. Because the Titans don't really have a digestive tract. And when their belly gets full of dead humans, they spit them up just so they can eat more dead humans. It's gruesome. I mean, this is one of the more gruesome moments we've had. This also drives home the idea that Titans don't eat humans for sustenance, but rather it's like a compulsion. Like I'd said, these aren't your typical biological constructs here. It gives us this really horrific image. It's definitely capable of imprinting on someone's psyche. More than one of these people that have seen this are going to have nightmares about it. But also, an organism that's occurring by natural means would not under any circumstances be without a digestive system. So this just further pushes that mystery of who are the Titans? Why do the Titans exist? What is the story behind the existence of these Titans in the first place? Just keeps me intrigued as if I weren't already curious enough. And then Aaron wakes up in a dungeon cell, once again showing that in this world, no good deed goes unpunished. And you gotta think, if you're in Aaron's shoes here, you couldn't help but wonder, like, can you ever win the trust of people at large? And the way that he keeps getting punished for saving people, he keeps getting punished for being what should be a hero. And it makes me ask sort of a rhetorical question, and that's, how long can you treat someone like a villain before they actually become one? I mean, you're creating the villain here by telling him he's the bad guy and that he can't be trusted. Or maybe it's more like Batman said, you either die a hero or live to see yourself become the villain. It's all food for thought here. But Levi. Captain Levi's outside the cell along with this character called Commander Erwin, who I guess is the commander of Levi's squad. And Erwin happens to have the key to Aaron's father's basement, the key to Grisha's basement. And he seems to know something about it. And again, this begs me to ask questions like, how does Captain Erwin even know about any of this? But Levi and Erwin seem just as curious about what's in this basement as I am, and it looks like they're going to join forces here to go figure out what's in the basement, Levi steps forward and he offers to look after Aaron and to take responsibility for Aaron. And this is kind of like a Mikasa moment, but it's also a little bit different because he doesn't want to be Aaron's protector like Mikasa does. But he's confident that should Aaron go rogue, he's the one who has the abilities to dispose of Aaron if that's what needs to be done. So once again, similar to Mikasa, but a little bit of a mirror image in what the ultimate goal could be there. This is a wonderful moment. It gives this story the extra element it needs to go into the second half of the season, to get us moving towards that basement and those secrets that it holds. I can't wait to get into the back half of season 1 to see where all of this unpredictable story phenomenon is going to take me. I just can't wait to check out episode 14. So I'll be back with a reaction to episode 14 soon, to be followed with a review of the next 2 episodes. So I'll talk to you in a couple of days. See you then.